Hey guys, tonight we tumble into a place that smells like boiled leaves, old wood, and warm smoke. You're barefoot, and the floor is slick with something sticky, maybe dye runoff, maybe mulberry juice, you don't ask. The room is dim, save for sunlight sneaking through paper windows, casting glowing stripes across rows of looms clacking in hypnotic rhythm. The air hums with thread and labor. You blink against steam rising from a nearby vat, and there she is, an elderly weaver, her gray hair pinned with a bone comb, her hands moving faster than your internet during a thunderstorm. You've stepped into a Han Dynasty weaving workshop, somewhere around 100 BCE, where every breath seems woven with silk dust and mystery. You probably won't survive this, not just because you're hilariously unskilled with machinery, but because you're likely allergic to half the ingredients floating in this room. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see where and when we're all tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't arrive as an honored guest or even a novice apprentice. You're more like an accidental time-traveling intern who got dropped off at the wrong dynasty. Someone hands you a damp towel, perhaps out of kindness, or perhaps because you're visibly sweating and making everyone uncomfortable. You shuffle between the looms. Tall wooden frames rise above you like the skeletons of ships turned upright. Horizontal beams stretch taut silk threads from end to end, and a soft, repeated thunk of wooden pedals keeps the air vibrating. You try to walk without touching anything. Everything looks fragile, valuable, or sticky. One loom has peacock feather patterns forming beneath the weaver's hands, another appears half-finished, its crimson threads cascading down like a waterfall frozen in mid-air. A girl no older than 12 leads you to a quiet corner where fresh silk bolts hang like drying laundry. She points to a thick curtain and gestures for you to go behind it. No one speaks, but you hear the unspoken rule: don't ask questions too loudly. Don't touch anything that shimmers. Behind the curtain, the air is warmer, heavier. You realize it's not just silk being spun here, it's a carefully choreographed dance of heat, time, and silence. You hear the bubbling of water, the squeak of strained bamboo, and something munching. You peer into the gloom and find baskets full of fat, pale worms. Silkworms. They're busy devouring mulberry leaves with alarming determination. Their bodies twitch with the slow grace of underwater dancers. A few are beginning their cocoon phase, wrapping themselves in thread so fine it disappears if you stop focusing. A woman squats by a fire, stirring a steaming pot with a bamboo paddle. It smells faintly of tea and burned hair. You step closer, only to jump as she flings something into the pot, a cluster of full cocoons. The heat kills the pupa inside, halting its metamorphosis. It's a weirdly brutal moment in an otherwise gentle scene. Silk doesn't wait for butterflies. The woman gently tugs a single thread from a softened cocoon and loops it onto a wheel. She repeats this with 3 more, combining the gossamer filaments into one stronger strand. You watch the wheel turn, thread gathering like moonlight on the surface of water. A warm breeze slips through the curtain, and you briefly forget how itchy your own clothes feel. Historical records, mostly buried in dry imperial treatises, say workshops like this were common across Han cities, especially in the Jiangnan region, where mulberry trees grew like weeds and humidity made spinning easier. Women, often from generations of weavers, were the heart of this craft. You wonder if their hands were insured. Probably not. A fringe detail? Some weavers use their own saliva to soften the thread. You try not to think about this as the wheel spins faster. Honestly, with enough steam and centuries between you, it somehow feels poetic. You lean against a support beam and try to look casual. A cat slinks past your feet like a wisp of smoke, then curls near the fire. You can't help but think, is this the least boring moment in the boring history series so far? But the silence breaks as an older man enters the workshop, murmuring something in classical Chinese. You don't catch the meaning, but everyone straightens. This is likely the overseer, or maybe a pattern master. His robes are simple but dyed a deep blue, indigo imported, possibly, from India via early Silk Road trade. That's your mainstream fact. By the way, even during the Han, silk wasn't just domestic business, it was global currency. He gestures for someone to prepare the next batch of cocoons, and you get to watch the whole process again. It's oddly soothing the second time. Maybe it's the repetitive motion, or maybe your brain is starting to drift. Sleepy? Already? You haven't even met the treadle loom yet. As the sun shifts in the sky, the light on the silk bolts changes color. Pale yellow becomes gold. Rose turns to blood red. Everything glows. Historians still argue whether the Han weaving guilds were centrally controlled by the state or mostly family-run cooperatives. You're leaning toward both, especially since there's clearly some hierarchy here. One woman pours herself tea, another doesn't dare touch the kettle. You pull a thread from your sleeve, compare it to the silk in front of you, and laugh a little to yourself. It's like comparing a rubber band to a violin string. No contest. The girl who brought you in reappears and presses something into your hand. It's a small square of raw silk, unfinished, a little sticky, still warm. A gift, maybe? Or just something to keep your hands busy so you stop touching the looms. Either way, you cradle it like treasure. You sit cross-legged in the corner, lulled by the click-thunk hiss of silk being born all around you. Somewhere nearby, a sparrow chirps. The fire crackles. You can almost hear the silkworms chewing. No rush to leave. We're only just beginning. You wake, barely, from a drowsy haze as someone hands you a wicker basket lined with linen. Inside are what look like sticky cotton balls, each one no bigger than your thumb. The silkworm cocoons are soft, light, and oddly warm. You tilt the basket and watch them roll like marshmallows at a bonfire picnic. Except, with fewer snacks and more ancient Chinese textile labor. This is the part before silk becomes thread, before the loom sings or the patterns emerge. You're witnessing the most important, most delicate stage of the whole process, unraveling the cocoon. No pressure. The women gather around shallow clay basins of warm water, heated just enough to soften the sarrasin, the sticky protein that binds the cocoon together. They poke and stir gently, searching for the loose end like someone untangling last year's Christmas lights. Except here, the prize isn't an extension cord, it's a single, shimmering filament. And this single thread, it could stretch over 1,000 meters from just one cocoon. You blink. 1,000 meters. From a bug. This is the historical fact that finally breaks your sense of scale. A teenager across from you laughs softly as a cocoon slips from her chopsticks and plops into the dye vat by mistake. Someone jokes, probably saying, "Now it's pre-colored," and everyone chuckles. It's a light moment in an otherwise serious process. The workshop is like a well-run kitchen, even the laughter is quiet, so as not to ruin the broth. Your hands twitch as if to help, and an older woman gently taps your wrist with a wet stick. Not yet. You haven't turned those calluses. One weaver dips her fingers into a bowl of rice paste, coating her fingertips before touching the raw silk. It helps grip the thread better. That's your quirky tidbit for this section. Rice paste is proto-finger glue. They've got better tools than you think. No Velcro? Sure. But plenty of ancient hacks. The moment a thread is found, the woman loops it onto a spindle. Nothing fancy, just a stick balanced inside a ceramic bowl. Another thread is added, then another. The goal is not just one strand, but many, twisted together into a working filament thick enough to withstand dyeing, weaving, and possibly years wrapped around some court noble with too many titles and not enough humility. The sound here is gentle but constant, the trickle of water, the slight groan of baskets shifting, the occasional brush of silk against silk like wind over paper. One girl sings under her breath, an old folk song about spring mulberry leaves. You don't understand the lyrics, but the tune sticks to your brain like syrup. You kneel beside a vat and see someone stirring it not with a spoon, but with a fan-shaped bundle of bamboo slivers. As she moves it in circles, a strange, fibrous cloud rises from the surface, half silk, half steam. It smells of wet bark and a faintly sweet, herbal scent. The woman dips a thread and twirls it around her wrist to test its strength. It snaps. She doesn't flinch. Just tosses it and starts again. You realize this is all part of the process. Trial, error, repeat. Kind of like trying to bake bread without YouTube. Overhead, bundles of already spun threads hang to dry, their colors ranging from moon pale to sun gold. You reach out to touch one, and someone clears their throat, firmly. Right. No touching the drying silk. You're 0 for 2 in cultural etiquette today. A scholar enters the workshop. You spot him instantly. He's the only one carrying bamboo slips tied in scrolls under his arm and not a single callus on his hand. He observes, scribbles something, and murmurs about imperial quotas. You catch a phrase that sounds like palace order for 10 bolts due by solstice. Everyone groans, but keeps working. State contracts, it seems, are no modern curse. Even in Han China, bureaucracy waits for no worm. Historians still argue whether this entire silk industry was controlled directly by the imperial government or operated more like a network of family guilds under supervision. Some say Empress Lu Ji herself took an active interest in silk production, both for export and symbolism. Others claim that nobles just wanted pretty robes and didn't care how they got made. You're leaning toward the Empress theory, if only because the detail here screams top-down pressure. These women work fast, but nothing feels sloppy. Every cocoon gets attention. Every strand is tested. You wonder if silk weavers were the unsung engineers of the ancient world. No chisels. Just thread and precision. Your legs start to cramp, so you shuffle over to a low bench. A grandmotherly weaver pats the space beside her. You sit, and she hands you a cocoon, then shows you, patiently, how to find the tail end. You squint, tongue pressed to the roof of your mouth like a 5-year-old doing finger painting. After a few seconds of fiddling, you find it. She nods and mutters something approving. You've passed silk preschool. Together, you feed the end into a spindle, and she turns the crank slowly, letting you watch the transformation. Chaos to line, fuzz to filament. The thread glints in low light like spun sugar. For one dizzy moment, you feel like you're creating something magical. Then she takes over again. Faster, smoother, practiced beyond your comprehension. You smile and wipe your fingers on your tunic, which, let's be honest, has probably absorbed more history in one day than any museum brochure ever could. As twilight leaks in through the paper windows, the light shifts to amber. Steam rises in golden curls, and the silk glows like ghosts drying on laundry lines. You yawn. You've done almost nothing physical, and you're still exhausted. It's not just the heat or the humidity or the concentration. It's the quiet. It's the sense that something impossibly old is happening around you, and it doesn't need you to understand it, it just needs you not to mess it up. You lean your head back against the post. The basket of cocoons is lighter now. You watch one of the women untangle a final thread and whisper thanks, not to you, but to the silkworm. Not a joke. A real thanks. You whisper one too. And with that, the silk is ready. The silk is ready. But now comes the part that separates the amateurs from the legends, spinning. Not the lazy Sunday on a patio kind of spinning. This is a tightrope act involving tension, coordination, and fingers that move so fast they blur. You try not to blink too much. You don't want to miss what is essentially an ancient optical illusion built from worm spit. You're ushered into a corner of the workshop where spinning wheels sit like crouched animals, wooden, silent, waiting. The air smells different here. Less steamy, more dry and fibrous, like sun-dried straw with a hint of chalk. A few strands of raw silk flow through the air, catching the fading daylight like fairy lights gone rogue. The woman who helped you earlier gestures to one of the smaller wheels, and another apprentice begins to demonstrate. You watch as she ties a few strands of silk together, then starts turning the wheel's crank with her right hand while guiding the filament with her left. The thread tightens, twists, elongates. What was once the thickness of a baby's hair now becomes a thread strong enough to lift a beetle, or at least hold up a hemline at a royal banquet. You're offered a seat, which you accept with all the grace of someone trying to sit on a yoga ball for the first time. The stool creaks. Your knees protest. The silk does not care. You attempt the spin. You fail the spin. Your first thread unravels like spaghetti in a rainstorm. The silk snarls around the spindle, and you briefly invent a new knot that no weaver in 5,000 years of textile history has encountered. Congratulations. The girl chuckles and reaches over, gently fixing your mess with fingers that barely seem to move. She tightens the tension with the toe of her foot, a pedal hidden under the bench, and resumes spinning as if no tangle had ever existed. You watch, mesmerized. This is where silk becomes string. It's not flashy. It's not loud. But it is precise. And in this part of the world, at this point in time, that precision is everything. Your mainstream fact for this moment: Han Dynasty silk was often double spun for strength. a technique where two twisted threads were then twisted around each other again, producing a cord strong enough to survive dyeing, weaving, wearing, and possibly falling asleep in during particularly boring lectures on Confucian classics. Spinning continues around you. You begin to pick out rhythms in the sound. Each spinner has a slightly different tempo, like a loom orchestra warming up. The older women keep steady, slow beats. The younger girls whirl faster, confident, almost cocky. You get the feeling there's an unspoken contest going on. Who can spin the longest unbroken strand without snapping? A girl across the room suddenly gasps, then beams. She's reached the bottom of her spindle with no brakes. Someone hands her a sesame bun. Apparently, that's the prize. You briefly consider starting over just for the snack. Meanwhile, your eyes drift to the baskets of finished spools beside the wheel. Hundreds of tiny reels, each one wound like a cinnamon roll made of moonlight. You pick one up and hold it close. It's smooth, cool, incredibly light. You can see how this thread, mere microns thick, could become armor for an emperor. Or handkerchiefs for a court poet. Or rope to lower a scandalous concubine from a palace window. Historians are still debating whether that story is real or just early tabloid gossip. There's an older man in the corner working on something different. Instead of a wheel, he uses a drop spindle, an ancient tool that looks like a small weighted disc on a stick. He spins it in midair and lets gravity twist the thread. You ask if this is a backup method. He grunts and mumbles something like this was the method. Right. No wheels before this guy's time. Just hands, patience, and sore backs. And here's your fringe fact, in some rural areas, drop spindles were carved from jade or bone, not for better spinning, but because artisans believed certain materials brought better chi into the final fabric. So yes, your silk shirt might have once carried bonus vibes. Very exclusive. Very metaphysical. You return to your wheel. Try again. Your thread survives slightly longer this time, 6 inches, maybe 10, before it splits into fluff and shame. But hey, progress is progress. A weaver claps softly from behind you, then takes your spindle and spins the last few inches back into order. Her expression is gentle, and maybe a little amused. A bell rings softly in the distance. Time for the evening meal. You rise slowly, back stiff, and notice the fine silk dust clinging to your forearms. It glitters faintly. You look like you lost a glitter fight at a Renaissance fair. Outside, the sun is setting. You step into the yard, rubbing your palms together to shake off the fibers. The apprentices are gathered around a stone table with bowls of rice and bean curd. A few weavers are still spinning inside, trying to finish one more spool before nightfall. The work never really stops, it just pauses. You ask, half serious, how many threads are needed to make one bolt of silk cloth? Someone answers without looking up, about 5,000 threads per inch. You blink. That can't be right. But it is. Historians still argue about the exact count, but the math always comes out absurd. Every robe, every scarf, every imperial sash required tens of thousands of strands, all individually spun. It's no wonder silk was once worth its weight in gold. A moth flutters past your ear. You watch it disappear into the shadows of a mulberry tree. A full circle reminder. From bud to thread, from tree to shoulder. As you sit under the eaves, cradling a half-finished spool of your own failure, someone offers you a bowl of tea. It tastes like leaves and smoke and something you can't name. You sip slowly. It's good. The stars are coming out now, faint and tentative in the twilight. One by one, lanterns light up the edge of the workshop. And inside, the wheels keep turning. You're back inside the workshop before the moon has fully cleared the roofline, standing now beside the dyeing vats, each one a murky cauldron of liquid color. The air here is heavy, saturated with smells that can't decide if they're pleasant or terrifying. One moment, it's the floral sweetness of crushed lotus petals. The next, something distinctly bog-like and beetly. The dye master is a stout, unsmiling woman whose apron is permanently stained in concentric rings of every hue imaginable. She doesn't say much, but the way others defer to her suggests she's something like a local deity, part artist, part chemist, and part magician. You watch her stir a vat with a long wooden paddle, and suddenly the water changes from a dull brown to a gleaming, midnight blue. It's mesmerizing. and just a little suspicious. You lean over one vat that smells like spinach left in the sun too long. The liquid inside is a bubbling greenish yellow, and a bundle of silk threads dangles within it, bobbing like a ghost jellyfish. Turmeric and gardenia, someone whispers beside you. You nod knowingly, even though you were 99% sure it was algae. Your mainstream fact for this moment: Han-era dyers used an astonishing range of natural materials to color silk: madder root for red, indigo for blue, safflower for orange, and walnut husks for brown. These were not thrown together randomly. There were centuries-old formulas for every shade, with specific soaking times, water temperatures, and fiber pre-treatments. A purple robe wasn't just rare, it was a math problem. Next to you, a girl drops a bundle of raw silk into what looks like thick gray soup. You ask what's in it, and she cheerfully replies, crushed gallnuts and stale urine. You recoil. She shrugs. It helps the color stick. Yes, that's your quirky tidbit. Ancient Chinese dyers sometimes used fermented human urine to fix dyes. You try not to think about which dynasty you last used the bathroom in. She pulls the bundle out and wrings it gently. The silk has taken on a soft smoky hue, something between pewter and ash, but with just enough shimmer to make you question whether this shade exists in your normal 21st century vocabulary. You want to call it storm silver. The dye master moves to a vat marked with a red wax seal. She lifts the lid slowly, and the smell hits first: earthy, slightly metallic, and sharply floral. Inside are floating beetles, dead, obviously, soaked in a red-black solution that glows under lamplight. Cochineal, she says quietly. You know this word, even if you don't remember from where. It's used for crimson. Even today. Except it doesn't arrive from Mexico for another millennium. You ask how. She looks confused. Not cochineal. Lack insects. Ah. Right bug, wrong continent. Your modern brain is getting in the way again. She dips a skein of thread in and turns it slowly. When it emerges, it's the deepest red you've ever seen, like melted garnets. It almost hums with color. And it isn't just about looking pretty. In Han symbolism, red signified joy, fertility, and sometimes divine authority. If you wore this color in a procession, you weren't just fashionable. You were announcing your cosmic alignment. Meanwhile, a different apprentice brings over bundles of silk that have been pre-dyed in lighter, more pastel tones. These are destined to be over-dyed, a layering process that deepens complexity. Light yellow over blue makes green. Pale red over gray becomes mauve. Silk, being protein-based like your own hair, absorbs dye differently than, say, linen or hemp. This gives it its famous luster, but also makes it temperamental. Too much heat? Thread melts. Too little heat? Color fades. You've basically walked into a chemistry lab disguised as a tie-dye party. Historians still argue whether some of the deeper shades, especially imperial purples, were reserved strictly for nobility. There are records of punishments for commoners who wore forbidden colors. But there are also fragments of garments found in tombs of lower-class citizens dyed in shockingly luxe tones. Was it a black market dye job? A gift from a noble? Or maybe a quiet act of rebellion, hidden under a tunic? No one knows for sure. Someone hands you a bundle of undyed silk and motions toward a pot bubbling with mulberry bark extract. You hesitate, then lower the threads in. The smell is sharp, like bitter tea. After a few minutes, you pull them out. The color is gentle, almost like honeyed ivory. The kind of shade that makes you think of temples at dusk, or antique paper left in sunlit windows. The dye master nods. You haven't ruined anything. This is high praise. You watch as another girl paints a dye directly onto stretched silk using a brush. This isn't immersion, it's detail work. Fine florals, ink wash birds, and winding clouds. Some areas will be dyed first, then resisted. Others get overlaid with wax to protect sections from later baths. You've stumbled into the earliest stages of what might one day be called batik. Except here, it's nameless. Just art and practicality colliding. Someone mentions a new technique involving alum as a mordant. It binds pigment better, they say, but sometimes causes the silk to stiffen. The group debates. Some prefer tradition. Others want deeper saturation. You just nod and sip your tea. You're getting good at blending in. The walls of the dyeing room are stained with streaks of every color you can imagine. They say the dye masters can read a wall like a map, each strip a signature of someone's success. Or someone's panicked sprint to the rinse barrel. You stand and stretch. Your hands are blotched with color, and your tunic sleeves bear the evidence of poor vet navigation. You look like you arm wrestled a rainbow, and lost, but you also feel a tiny shift. You understand the stakes now. This isn't just about fashion or trade or even ritual. This is about taking something as plain as worm thread and elevating it into a language of status, belief, identity. When a woman walks into court wearing phoenix orange robes with green jade embroidery, she's not just showing wealth, she's speaking in silk. This was a vocabulary woven, dyed, and spun, one fiber at a time. You leave the dye room blinking, cheeks flushed, fingers sticky. Night has fully arrived now. Someone brings lanterns, their paper skins dancing gold in the wind. And the silk, now vibrant and scented with bark and flower and fire, is strung out to dry in the breeze. And you, for once, manage not to touch anything. The dyed silk has dried overnight, its colors now more settled, deeper, quieter, like the colors have taken a breath and decided to stay. You wake early, or maybe you never quite slept. The workshop begins to stir just as the horizon blushes with pale gold. Roosters call. A tea kettle whistles. Somewhere nearby, someone hums a lullaby that feels, oddly, like a good morning. You follow the sound of footsteps into another part of the complex, the pattern room. Here, the air doesn't smell like dye or fire. It smells like ink and patience. Scrolls line the walls, rolled tightly and labeled in neat brushstrokes. On low tables, others lay unfurled, each one covered in delicate sketches. Clouds that curl into dragons, phoenixes with tails like comets, peonies large as dinner plates. There are landscapes, too, rivers winding through mountains, birds flitting through bamboo groves. Each is rendered in fine black ink with a few instructions scrawled along the side, specifying thread count, stitch angle, or color priority. You squat beside a boy barely older than 10, who's copying a phoenix pattern by candlelight with a brush so thin it trembles with his every breath. He glances up, eyes wide and blinking, then returns to his work. A mistake would mean scrapping the scroll, and paper is expensive. Mistakes, here, are not casual things. The pattern master enters. You know he's the master because everyone suddenly becomes quieter than usual. He has the kind of hands you only get after 50 years of drawing on silk, broad, steady, and stained with ink that will never fully wash away. He approaches one of the scrolls on the wall, unrolls it carefully, and pins it to a wooden frame. This is the design for today's brocade, a repeating motif of clouds, cranes, and something that might be a chileen, or maybe just a really enthusiastic goat. He begins to explain the pattern to his apprentices, tapping each section with the end of his brush. Your mainstream fact for today: the Han Dynasty was the first major Chinese dynasty to establish a standardized repertoire of textile motifs. Many of these had specific meanings. Cranes for longevity. Dragons for imperial authority. Peonies for wealth. Everything woven into a robe was also a message. The master pauses by the chileen, goat thing, and frowns. Too Western, he mutters. They'll think it came from the UAG. The UAG, you recall from some half-remembered lecture, were nomads far to the west. Possibly ancient Kushans. Possibly a headache for cartographers. He changes the creature's head with a few quick strokes. Now it looks more dignified. Still weird. But at least like a creature you'd be okay sharing a tea pavilion with. You lean against a pillar and observe. The scrolls are not merely blueprints, they're choreography. Each movement of thread, every shift in the shuttle, must follow this plan or the whole piece loses its rhythm. It's the ancient version of a weaving codebase, except there's no Ctrl+Z when you mess up. Someone rolls out a new type of graph paper, well, grid parchment, really. This is for counted patterns, the kind used in loom-woven brocade. Each square corresponds to a thread intersection. You marvel at the math. Every crane wing, every spiral cloud, must be plotted like a battle plan. Historians still argue whether the most elaborate Han silk patterns were done entirely by memory or with this sort of prelume drafting. Some say master weavers memorized whole sequences of 10,000 warp lifts. Others believe designs were whispered stitch by stitch, loom to loom. a kind of living transmission of knowledge. You get dizzy just thinking about it. The quirky detail for this section? Pattern masters sometimes included hidden jokes or symbols in their designs, like a tiger with a rabbit tail to tease a rival guild, or a slightly too fancy chicken that looked suspiciously like the local magistrate. Textile shade wasn't just a metaphor. One apprentice leans close to a scroll and whispers, "That dragon has 6 claws." You frown. "So?" She grins. "Only emperors get 5. 6 is overkill." A pause. Or maybe flattery. You spot one sketch that's unlike the others. It shows a landscape with small figures walking along a mountain pass, a caravan disappearing into a gorge. "That's for trade cloth," the master explains. "Special commissions. Silk bound for the West." You realize this isn't just fashion or symbolism, it's propaganda. A traveler in Parthia might wear this and feel part of something vast. The master lays a translucent panel over the drawing and begins to mark thread positions with a fine bamboo stylus. This overlay will guide the loom operators, a visual map to keep colors aligned and figures legible even after 500 passes of the shuttle. The light grows brighter as the sun rises. Tea arrives. You accept a cup gratefully, watching steam rise and curl like the clouds inked across the paper in front of you. The room is quiet. Focused. The kind of quiet that gets things done. At last, the master rolls up the scrolls and hands them off to a runner, who will take them to the weaving chamber. The apprentice's bow. You try to bow to and nearly knock over a brush pot. An apprentice catches it midair and flashes you a forgiving smile. You're still the clumsiest tourist in the Han. As you leave, you glance back once more. The pattern room has the stillness of a shrine. But not the kind that worships silence. It worships planning. Precision. The belief that beauty is not a coincidence but a calculation. The door closes behind you, and already you hear the looms beginning to stir. You duck your head as you step into the weaving hall, a cavernous space alive with motion, like the inside of a musical instrument made entirely of wood, thread, and sore backs. The sound hits you first, the dull, rhythmic thump of pedals. The click and clack of wooden shuttles flying across warped threads. The occasional grunt of concentration. It's like stepping into a forest of machine creatures, each one humming its own sleepy lullaby. The smell here is different again, drier, less earthy than the dyeing room. You catch hints of warmed wood, camphor oil, and the sharp tang of resin from the loom wax. Sunlight slants in through high slatted windows, making the dust in the air shimmer like silk motes in mid-float. You squint. You're definitely blinking more slowly now. Before you stands a floor loom, actually, about 20 of them. Each one taller than you, wide as a doorway, and operated by a woman, or two, who barely glances up when you arrive. Their hands and feet move with practiced precision, adjusting tension rods, throwing shuttles, tapping pedals that clack like bones. One of the weavers gestures you over to an empty seat. You hesitate. Your thighs already ache in anticipation. You sit anyway. A warm wooden frame surrounds you like scaffolding for the soul. And there in front of you, dozens of vertical threads pulled taut across the frame, stretching away into possibility. This is the warp, the backbone of the cloth. Your job, should you survive it, is to insert the weft, the horizontal threads, one row at a time, over and under, following a pattern so complex it makes your tax documents look breezy. Your mainstream historical fact for this moment. Han Dynasty looms were among the most advanced in the world at the time. While they didn't yet include the draw loom innovations of later dynasties, these treadle-operated machines allowed for complex weaving with multiple pattern layers, some with as many as 12 pedals to control the warp threads. 12. You begin to understand why ancient weavers had thighs of steel. The weaver next to you grins and points to her own feet. She lifts her tunic hem slightly, revealing calves that could probably crush bamboo. You nod with admiration and mild fear. Your quirky fact? Some weaving families gave nicknames to their favorite looms, like Little Ox or Grandmother's Elbow. Superstitions grew around them. If a loom broke mid-pattern, it was considered bad luck, and some weavers would place incense sticks or leave rice offerings nearby. You consider whispering a polite greeting to your loom. Just in case. The woman instructs you with slow hand motions. You press one treadle with your foot. A section of the warp threads lifts. She hands you a shuttle, a slim wooden vessel loaded with dyed silk thread. You toss it gently across the open shed. That's the gap you just made. The shuttle sails through and she nods approvingly. Next step, change treadles. Different threads rise. Throw the shuttle back the other way. The weaver shows you how to beat the thread in place using a comb-like tool called a reed. Beat is a strong word, more like persuade. Still, it settles the thread snugly. You repeat this. Again. Then again. It's surprisingly hypnotic. You start to hear the pattern emerge, not visually, but musically. Each combination of treadles makes a different rhythm underfoot. Tap-clack. Tap-tap-clack. It's a textile waltz. You're weaving without looking now. Your mind begins to float. Then you ruin it. The weft catches on a warp thread and bunches. You've created a lump the size of a small caterpillar. The woman leans in, examines it, and sighs so softly it might be a breeze. She unpicks 3 rows. You wince, but she just shrugs. Better before than after, she might be saying. You watch as the next loom over completes a section of brocade. The fabric spills out like a waterfall of midnight, deep indigo patterned with glinting silver clouds. You're not sure what's more impressive, the design or the fact that she's doing it upside down. Yes, that's right, many Han weavers worked their patterns from the back of the cloth, following a mirror image mapped in their heads. The front would only be revealed when the fabric was cut free. Imagine painting a portrait while only seeing the back of the canvas. Now imagine doing it perfectly for 20 feet straight. Historians still argue whether these reverse weaving techniques were passed orally or via visual diagrams like those you saw earlier in the pattern room. Some say elite weavers memorized sequences by rhythm, like music. Others believe they recited poetic mnemonics aloud as they worked. Either way, the result is the same. You're extremely underqualified. The weaver beside you finishes a stretch, clips the thread, and unrolls the panel. The fabric gleams, seafoam green with copper accents, a mountain motif that ripples like actual water when she shakes it. You exhale. You had no idea cloth could look like memory. She hands it off to an apprentice, who folds it with reverence. You return to your station, where your weaving attempts resemble the aftermath of a sparrow's wrestling match. Still, you're starting to get it. The feel of tension. The flow of foot to hand. Your body begins to remember even when your brain is 6 seconds behind. Then someone calls out. Everyone stops. It's tea break. You slide out from the loom like a snail from its shell, knees popping, calves whimpering. You sit on a woven mat, sipping jasmine tea, hands tingling from thread tension and nerves. You look around. Everyone here seems so calm. So practiced. Their hands are worn. But their faces are serene. Maybe it's the repetition. Maybe it's the rhythm. Or maybe it's the quiet magic of making something tangible from nothing but string and time. As you finish your tea, you glance back at your loom. The silk threads glint softly, waiting. There's a row missing. You'll fix it later. For now, you breathe. You're still here. Still learning. And the loom? It waits. Afternoon light spills across the looms like liquid gold, and you're back at your station, sore but slightly less incompetent. Your earlier mess has been gently patched by the weaver next to you, who gives you a patient nod before returning to her own elaborate tapestry of plum blossoms and curling mist. Today's task is less about practice and more about understanding the deeper layers, the structural choreography behind the illusion. You think weaving is just up and down, left and right? That's adorable. Now you're introduced to the pattern assistant, a job so complex, it makes loom operation look like sweeping a porch. The assistant, a thin man with fingers like spider legs and a memory like a spreadsheet, sits on a raised stool above a multi-shaft loom. He doesn't touch the loom itself. Instead, he pulls cords connected to heddles, vertical threads that control which warps lift for each pass. You watch him, eyes wide, as he manipulates a web of strings that change the pattern every few rows. Your mainstream historical fact: advanced Han looms used early versions of heddle systems to produce intricate patterns like jin, brocade, and iju, gauze with floating motifs. These systems paved the way for later draw looms and eventually, many centuries later, the jacquard loom, which inspired early computing. You blink. You're watching the ancestor of computer programming. In robes. With dusty eyebrows. The pattern assistant mutters to himself, counting something under his breath, and suddenly the design shifts. A phoenix's tail curls the other way. You didn't even see it happen. It's as if the loom has a mind of its own. You whisper this to the woman next to you, and she shrugs. The loom remembers, she says. You're not sure if she's joking. Your quirky tidbit for today? Some pattern masters tied tiny knots in horsehair cords as physical reminders for complex sequences, like 2nd century post-it notes. You pick one up and see a series of knots spaced evenly apart. It could be a loom sequence. It could also be a very early friendship bracelet. Either way, you'd mess it up. The weaving floor feels different now. Less like a factory, more like a concert hall where every loom is an instrument and every assistant is a conductor. You're not creating fabric, you're performing it. The master weaver arrives, not the overseer, but the master. Elderly, mostly bald, robe flecked with gold thread that glitters when he moves. He surveys the work like a general pacing the front lines. His eyes linger on each cloth panel, nodding occasionally, frowning rarely. When he reaches your loom, he pauses. You brace yourself. He leans down, runs his fingers over your half-woven fabric, then lifts his eyebrow just enough to convey, "This is not terrible." You grin like a child handed a ribbon. Historians still debate whether master weavers were treated as artisans or low-ranking officials in Han China. Some held respected positions, especially those tied to state workshops. Others, especially in rural guilds, worked humbly, quietly, passing their knowledge only within the family. You suspect this master is the type who pretends to be invisible but notices everything. He unrolls a completed bolt of cloth and pins it up for everyone to see. It's breathtaking. Deep red silk embroidered with gold thread, the pattern alternating rows of twin dragons and chrysanthemum blossoms. But the real brilliance lies in the technique. The dragons are woven in a slightly raised weave, catching the light differently. The flowers lie flatter, matte. The whole panel seems to shift as the light changes, like a moving painting frozen in cloth. He turns to the group and says something about chi and balance, about how a pattern isn't just beautiful, but must feel alive. You get it. Somehow, you get it. You're invited to help load a fresh warp onto a smaller loom. It's heavy work, requiring 3 people and a lot of yelling. The threads dangle. Someone trips. An apprentice is sent to get tea while the rest of you curse in 6 dialects. Once the warp is loaded, the fun begins, aligning the warp tension so that every thread sits just right. Not too tight, not too loose. You're given the task of adjusting the beams. You overcorrect. The weft bunches. The senior weaver sighs and fixes it in 5 seconds flat. You're reminded, again, that silk may look delicate, but it has the personality of a spoiled tiger cub. Touch it wrong, and it bites. Later, the pattern assistant lets you pull one heddle cord under supervision. You try. The wrong threads lift. The entire cloud pattern shifts into something that looks like a flailing eel. The weavers laugh kindly. Someone calls it accidental modernism. Eventually, you retreat to observe from the side. The afternoon sunlight fades, and oil lamps are lit. Their glow makes the silk shimmer in unpredictable ways. Each loom, each cloth panel, glows like it's holding in a secret. A woman walks past with a bolt of black silk embroidered with silver cranes. It's meant for morning robes. The cloth rustles like whispers. You wonder how many tears it will absorb. You glance back at your own loom. It's not beautiful, not yet. But it's something. Your hands are sore, your back aches, but your brain is still humming from the rhythm of chords, the click of the reed, the tug of your own mistakes. The floor thins out as night deepens. Only a few looms remain active. The master sits nearby, watching. Not correcting. Just watching. You sit with your back to the wall, feeling the heat of the day finally cool. Outside, the cicadas begin their evening song, and the cloth on the loom shifts ever so slightly with the breeze. You don't move. You don't speak. You just listen, to the looms, to the quiet thrum of thread memory, and to the realization that here, even silence is part of the weave. You don't know what time it is when the looms finally fall silent, but the hush is so complete it rings in your ears like an aftersound. No more shuttle clicks, no treadle thumps, no threads being beaten into order. Just a long exhale from the building itself, like the very beams have decided to sleep, but not everyone rests. You're guided, sleepily, stiffly, into another chamber you haven't seen yet. Smaller, more intimate. There's a bench, a lacquered table, A few stools, and bundles of finished silk cloth stacked in neat rolls like firewood for a particularly elegant fireplace. This is the finishing room, and it hums with its own quiet intensity. In this space, raw woven silk is transformed into something even finer, trimmed, brushed, embroidered, and sometimes even re-dyed. It's the last stage before the silk leaves the workshop for palace, market, or tomb. Final touches. Final flourishes. You ease onto a stool and try not to make a sound. The woman beside you is embroidering a crane's wing onto deep blue cloth, each stitch so precise you feel like blinking might mess it up. The wing isn't just a shape, it's movement. A story. She dips her needle into a small dish of beeswax before every few stitches. You wonder why, until she hands you a needle and some spare thread and gestures for you to try. The first thing you learn, silk thread frays immediately. The second thing, beeswax is how you convince it not to. The thread glides easier now, and you start to understand how embroidery isn't just about decoration, it's a performance of memory and steadiness. You're not just stabbing fabric. You're drawing with string. Your mainstream historical fact, Han Dynasty embroidery reached such heights of detail that some fragments have survived with over 40 stitches per centimeter. That's not embroidery, that's sorcery. Or incredibly sore fingers. You squint and attempt to mimic the pattern. Your crane ends up looking like an angry duck with scoliosis. The older woman gently covers your hand and unthreads the damage. She doesn't laugh. She just shows you again. Slower this time. You spot another worker smoothing finished silk cloth with a flat, polished stone. You ask what he's doing, and he replies with a single word, calendaring. It's a kind of pressing technique. No heat, just pressure, repetition, and belief in the righteousness of flat things. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Han workshops used polished cow bones or jade rollers for this process. Not because they were magical, but because bone carried a natural oil that added subtle luster to the cloth. Imagine finishing your dress with a femur. Another woman works over a bolt of white silk with what looks like a handful of thistle heads. You look closer and realize, she's softening the surface, raising the nap slightly so it catches light more evenly. She offers you one. You run it gently over your own sleeve and feel the texture shift beneath your fingers, rough becoming smooth, light becoming velvet. Suddenly, a loud snap. From the back of the room. Someone broke a needle. No one panics. It's common. A new one is handed over like a teacup. But you notice something, the snap needle is not discarded. It's wrapped in silk and tucked into a small wooden box. You ask why. Needles have spirit, the embroiderer says. Even broken ones. Historians still argue whether these kinds of animistic rituals were common or just isolated to certain regions. Some suggest they're holdovers from even older traditions. Others believe it was a way of honoring tools that served you, same as burning old robes in funerary rites. You watch as a girl takes a finished length of embroidered silk and begins carefully trimming its edges with a blade so sharp it slices through fiber without a whisper. She folds it thrice, presses it under a weight, and ties it with red string. Another apprentice takes the bundle and places it in a lacquered chest marked with imperial characters. Destination, the capital. That bolt may one day drape over the shoulders of a court official, or hang as a backdrop in a ceremonial hall. It might line the walls of a scholar's study. Or be cut and stitched into a wedding robe so grand it will outshine the bride. Or be buried with someone important, never to be seen again. You rest your elbow on the workbench, eyes heavy. A tray of embroidered cuffs sits beside you, miniature works of art. Gold thread woven with tiny sapphires. Silk blossoms so real they seem to carry dew. You blink slowly, thinking you saw one tremble in the lamplight. Someone opens a window. Cool night air washes in, lifting the edge of a fabric roll. It flutters softly. Even the cloth breathes, it seems. You sit there, letting the sound of tiny stitches lull you. This room is quieter than the looms but somehow even more intense. Less about sweat, more about soul. And maybe that's the real secret of Han silk, not just its beauty or luxury, but the human energy braided into every inch of it. The breath behind the brushstroke. The story behind the stitch. A young girl rests her head on a finished bolt, already dozing. No one wakes her. Another apprentice ducks needles back into their silk-wrapped bundles. The old woman folds your sorry attempt at embroidery and says, gently, you'll be better tomorrow. You believe her. And just like that, You are too tired to speak. You wake slowly to the creak of wooden doors and the murmur of early voices, the kind of gentle stirring that says, the world is returning to motion, whether you're ready or not. Your body is stiff, your hands a little numb from holding needles and shuttles all day yesterday, but something deeper has shifted. You no longer feel like a tourist. Today, you're shown a room filled not with looms or dye vats, but shelves. Floor to ceiling. Every inch covered with bundles, scrolls, folded cloth, samples, even tablets etched with characters. This is the design archive, and it smells like dust, cedar oil, and infinite ambition. You run your fingers along the edge of one scroll, and the worker beside you pulls it down and unfurls it across a table. It's not a painting. It's a swatch map, dozens of tiny silk rectangles attached to labels in elegant brushstrokes. Each sample has a name: Moon over Cranes, Frosted Willow, Carp Leap in Autumn, and one simply labeled Joy. Your guide, an elder scribe with eyebrows that seem to exist in a different dimension from the rest of his face, explains that this is the master archive for a state-approved workshop. Every pattern ever woven is recorded here. Not just for memory, but for authority. Here's your mainstream historical fact: Han Dynasty China maintained textile bureaus in major cities, where officials tracked the output of state looms, catalogued new patterns, and ensured that certain motifs remained restricted to the nobility. These bureaus weren't just bureaucratic fluff, they shaped fashion, symbolism, and even diplomacy. You peer at another scroll. This one shows 4 columns of patterns arranged by rank. Dragons at the top, followed by phoenixes, cranes, tigers, and at the bottom, flowers, fruits, and clouds. You're told that only imperial family members could wear 5-clawed dragons. 4 claws meant nobility. 3, if you were lucky, meant you won't be arrested. The quirky tidbit? One archived pattern includes a monkey holding a peach riding on a turtle. No one knows why. Some say it's a dream the pattern master had. Others insist it was a joke commission for a birthday robe. Historians still argue if it's a coded political satire or just a case of ancient weirdcore. You climb a ladder to reach another shelf. The scroll you unroll this time contains more than pattern swatches, it's a full-length textile calendar. Each section corresponds to the lunar months, with suggested colors and motifs based on agricultural cycles, celestial signs, and court rituals. In the 4th month, for example, yellow silk with green vine embroidery is recommended, symbolizing new grain growth. In the 9th month, gray silk with red chrysanthemums for mourning and reflection. Even your clothes were expected to harmonize with the heavens. You wonder how people managed with this much wardrobe pressure. The scribe hands you a sample from the forbidden drawer. It's black silk embroidered with golden constellations, a design once reserved for royal astronomers. You hold it delicately, afraid it might evaporate. It shimmers like you're holding the night sky in your lap. You're invited to sit and watch as he records a new pattern. A bolt of finished silk is spread across the table. The cloth is rich violet, woven with silver thread in a meandering river pattern. He opens a jar of powdered ink, dips his brush, and begins to copy the motif with slow, deliberate strokes onto new parchment. Every curve, every crossing line is mapped. There's no tracing here. No stencils. Just the hand, the eye, the muscle memory passed down over lifetimes. He stops now and then to label the repeats: 2 phoenix, 4 cloud spirals, dragon spine. His assistant then copies a summary in neat block script onto a separate tablet, along with the cloth weight, number of warp threads per inch, dye mix used, and, your favorite part, notes on who commissioned the design and why. This one, apparently, was for a noblewoman who dreamed of sailing west. The river, the stars, even the phoenixes were woven to wish her a safe journey. She probably never made it to the sea. But the silk did. You pause at that, because maybe that's the hidden power of all this: textile as time machine. The people fade. Their names dissolve. But their robes remain. Their hopes are stitched into patterns that cross generations. Historians still debate how many of these archives survived. Some were surely lost in war, flood, or bureaucratic overhaul. Others, according to rumor, were smuggled west along the Silk Road, influencing Persian and Byzantine designs. It's hard to trace thread that's been rewoven 1,000 times. Before you leave, the scribe lets you sign your name, just once. in the margin of the practice scroll. You dip the brush, hold your breath, and scrawl your best attempt at an elegant character. It looks more like a startled frog. He chuckles and stamps it anyway with the red seal. "You were here," he says, as if that matters more than whether you were good. You descend the ladder and glance once more at the towering shelves. Somewhere in here are patterns that clothed emperors, robes worn during ancient eclipses, textiles offered to gods, gifts carried to foreign courts. All of it catalogued, remembered, or, perhaps, just waiting. You leave the archive with fingers ink smudged and mind spinning. Outside, the air feels brighter. The cloth on the drying lines flutters. A new bolt is loaded onto a cart, ready for travel. A messenger shouts, and the gate opens. Somewhere, far away, another person will touch this silk and feel the echo of all this. They'll know nothing of you, or the old scribe, or the crane that became a duck under your hand. But the thread connects you all anyway. You find yourself walking beside a cart now, its wheels creaking softly as it rumbles down a dirt path lined with flowering paulownia trees. On the cart, under a protective wrap of oiled linen, rest the silk bolts completed this month. Each bundle is tightly wrapped, bound with ribbon or rope, labeled in black ink with neat characters denoting color, motif, intended recipient, and, sometimes, a simple phrase like "for palace use" or "bride's trousseau." This is the final phase of the journey, distribution. From here, these precious fabrics will disperse across the empire and beyond, traveling by cart, boat, and, when the terrain becomes difficult, by mule, porter, or even in secret compartments carried by diplomatic envoys. You're accompanying the goods only as far as the local administrative post, but already it feels like an honor. You sit beside the driver, who doesn't talk much, save for muttering curses at potholes and the occasional goat that refuses to yield. Here's your mainstream historical fact: during the Han Dynasty, silk was not just a commodity, it was a currency. Taxes could be paid in bolts of silk. Diplomatic treaties were sealed with silk offerings. Military salaries were sometimes distributed in cloth instead of coin. And most famously, silk was the empire's most prized export, traveling thousands of miles westward along the early routes of what would become the Silk Road. You peer over the bundles and wonder, how many hands will touch this silk before it reaches its final wearer? How many translations will its value pass through? What customs inspectors will try, fail, or succeed in unraveling its meaning? Beside you, the driver shares a quirky detail. Once, a shipment of silk meant for the western border was intercepted by bandits. Instead of stealing it, they wrapped themselves in the cloth and sent a ransom note on a bolt of yellow gauze, embroidered with their demands. The ransom was paid. Not because of fear, but because the embroidery was exquisite. You laugh. He doesn't. It's true, he insists, reins in hand. I have a cousin who saw it. The road leads to a modest compound with whitewashed walls and a tiled gate. Inside, scribes wait at low tables to check the inventory, affix travel seals, and record the weight and quality of each bolt. The cart stops, and laborers quickly begin offloading the cargo. You're allowed to follow a bundle labeled "Court Ceremonial," autumn pattern into the intake office. The clerk opens the wrap with reverence, hands clean, sleeves tied back. The bolt is unfurled just enough to reveal a length of crimson silk embroidered with falling maple leaves and gold thread. He inhales audibly. "Maples," he murmurs. Very timely. He records the maker's mark, weighs the fabric, and stamps the cloth with an ink seal, a pair of phoenixes circling a character that means received. The bolt is then refolded, rewrapped, and packed in a chest marked Luoyang, the eastern capital. Historians still argue whether most Han silk exports left from Luoyang or Chang'an during different reigns. Some sources suggest parallel routes, east for domestic tribute, west for foreign trade. Others believe it was less centralized, relying more on the relationships between local guilds and powerful patrons. Meanwhile, a different bolt is unwrapped beside you, this one destined for a temple. It's plain white silk, without embroidery. The clerk nods solemnly. "Shroud cloth," he says, and you don't ask for details. You're offered tea while the inventory is completed. You sit quietly on a bamboo mat, sipping chrysanthemum brew and watching the work unfold. Bolts are measured with yardsticks marked in carved bone. Thread counts are checked by holding the fabric up to the light. Even sound is part of the inspection. A flick of the cloth, and the listener notes whether it sings properly. High-quality silk, apparently, has a voice like a faint bell. The driver, sensing your curiosity, explains that certain sounds can betray flaws in the weave. A harsh whisper for uneven tension, a dull thud for moisture damage. You try flicking a sample. It sounds like someone politely clearing their throat in another room. Good, he says, patting your shoulder. That means it's average. No one wants a dramatic robe. You learn something unexpected. Once silk enters official circulation, it can't be recycled for casual use. The emperor's cast-off robes can't become a merchant's curtain. There are strict protocols for the disposal or repurposing of high-grade silk, especially with imperial symbolism. Some is burned. Some is buried. Some, they say, is unraveled and rewoven into entirely new bolts, memory transformed, not erased. You peek into one of the final chests about to be sealed. Inside is the bolt you helped, badly, weave. Somehow, despite your inept hands, it's there, soft lilac with plum blossoms embroidered along the border. Not perfect, but good enough to pass inspection. You grin despite yourself. The chest is shut, sealed with red wax, and marked for travel by boat. The next leg of its journey will be watery, down the canal, past rice paddies and fishermen's huts, toward the mouths of larger rivers. Someone calls your name, your Han name, the one they gave you when you first stumbled into this workshop. You barely recognize it as yours, but your feet move automatically. It's time to return. You glance back as the shipment cart pulls away again. Chest after chest stacked high, lanterns swinging from the corners. Somewhere downriver, a noble might wear this silk. A bride might weep into it. A priest might wrap it around a scroll of prayers. You'll be long gone by then, but your thread will still be there, woven into someone else's tomorrow. You return to the workshop under a sky bruised with twilight, the soft thud of your sandals barely echoing on the packed dirt road. The gate creaks open with a familiar groan, and you're greeted by a different kind of sound this time, not the bustle of looms or the hiss of steam, but a low, rhythmic drumming. Following the sound, you slip quietly into a courtyard you haven't seen before. It's ringed with paper lanterns, and in the center, a silk canopy flutters in the evening breeze. Underneath it, seated in a circle on woven mats, are the workers, dye masters, weavers, apprentices, scribes, all cross-legged and hushed as the drumming continues. Tonight is festival night. You slide into an open space, feeling like a guest at a private celebration. No one minds. Someone hands you a rice dumpling wrapped in lotus leaf. Someone else pours warm wine into your cup. No words are necessary. The drumming stops. A girl stands, robe shimmering like a night pond, and begins to sing. Here's your mainstream historical fact: the Han Dynasty had over 130 officially recognized festivals, many tied to agricultural cycles and lunar phases. Workshops like this one, especially those producing state textiles, often followed these calendars not just for rest, but to realign with seasonal meaning, spiritual balance, and communal morale. Tonight's gathering celebrates Qixi, the Weaver Girls Festival. Yes, you heard that right, Weaver Girl. This is the night, legend says, when Zhinu, the celestial weaver, and her lover, the cowherd Niu Long, are allowed to meet. Once a year, across the Milky Way. It's romantic. It's tragic. It's possibly the world's oldest long-distance relationship. Someone sets a woven tapestry upright against a frame. It shows two figures, one at a loom, one with an ox, reaching for each other across a sky of golden thread. It glows under the lantern light, like a stitched star chart. The quirky tidbit? In some villages during Han times, young girls competed to thread the tiniest needles under moonlight during Qixi. The winner was said to have the steadiest hand and the brightest future as a weaver. Losing didn't mean shame, just fewer marriage offers. Someone nearby is doing just that, threading needles by lamplight, giggling with the others when they fumble. You try and fail. Twice. Then a small hand guides yours and helps you slip the thread through on the third try. Victory. They cheer. Later, a storyteller stands and recounts the legend of Zhinu and Niu Long with the dramatic flair of someone who's done this 1,000 times and still loves every word. You learn how the Weaver Girl's cloth wasn't just beautiful, it was sky cloth, cloud cloth, a fabric so fine it held up the heavens. You lean back, sipping warm wine, and feel a surprising pull of emotion. All these days spent learning, failing, threading and rethreading, you hadn't realized how deeply you'd stepped into their world. You're not just watching history anymore. You're sitting inside of it, wrapped in its stories, warmed by its food and fire. Someone hands you a square of dyed silk with a stitched character in the center. Heart. It's a gift, they say. For your journey. You nod, unable to speak. Historians still debate the actual origins of qixi, whether it predates the Han or was formalized during Empress Xuanzhi's reign. Some say the celestial weaver myth was once a practical metaphor, weaving as a cosmic force, the act of holding the sky together. Others think it's just a love story, passed down from mother to daughter, loom to loom. But here, tonight, it doesn't really matter. The music resumes, flute, drum, the soft tapping of fingers on bamboo. A few workers get up to dance, slow and stylized, like their bodies are extensions of thread, flowing, rising, looping back on themselves. One of the dye apprentices twirls, robe flaring like a sunburst, and you remember that saffron hue you saw days ago. She made it. And now it moves. You look up. Above the courtyard, the stars have begun to pierce the dusk, faint and blinking. You try to find the Milky Way. You think you see it, a faint ribbon across the heavens, like silk unfurled across an enormous loom. Someone nudges your shoulder. That's where she weaves, they whisper. Even now, you stay in the courtyard long after the music fades, after the food is packed away and the lanterns begin to dim. One by one, the others drift off to their rooms, their beds, their half-dreams. But you remain, gazing at the stars, feeling the woven threads of legend, memory, and cloth pulling gently through you. You understand something now, not with your head, but with your pulse. Silk isn't just cloth. It's devotion in physical form. It's a language of patience and precision. It's a love letter from human hands to the cosmos. And tonight, under a canopy of stars, you've read a little bit of that letter. The morning after the festival breaks gently across your face like a warm cloth. You rise slowly, shoulders aching in the way that's starting to feel familiar, like the workshop has carved itself into your muscles. The compound is quieter than usual, the workers moving at a more relaxed pace, still glowing from last night's celebration. You are assigned a light task today, sorting remnants. You're led to a narrow room where baskets overflow with trimmings, offcuts from sleeves, embroidery scraps, selvage edges too short to be used in full garments but too precious to discard. Silk, even in fragments, is never thrown away. Not here. Here's your mainstream historical fact: in Han China, the principle of Wu Si Fei Yang, nothing used is wasted applied rigorously to textile work. Silk was a luxury product, yes, but also one with state oversight. Every scrap was accounted for, repurposed, even taxed. You sit cross-legged before a low table with 3 baskets, plain, dyed, and embroidered. Your job is to sort by color and quality. Some pieces will be reused for smaller items, fans, tassels, prayer offerings. Others will be rewoven into new bolts via a technique called duanxi, or broken silk patchwork. Your fingers sift through dozens of textures. Some soft as moth wings, others stiff from pattern work. You pause at a tiny square, a cloud embroidered in silver thread on midnight blue. It's no bigger than your palm. A piece of something grander. You wonder what robe it came from, and who wore it. Who danced in it. Who wept. The woman next to you, an elderly patchworker with eyes like weathered jade, leans over and whispers, "Every cloth remembers." She taps your forehead. That's why you feel it. Quirky tidbit time: some aristocrats believed that wearing patchwork made from old silks brought good fortune, especially if the pieces came from robes worn during moments of great joy, weddings, births, festivals. They'd commission new garments stitched from the happy pasts of others. Call it vintage energy hoarding. You watch as the patchworker begins sewing 2 scraps together. Not a simple backstitch, this is something more elegant. A hidden seam that leaves no edge visible, just a seamless flow. When she's done, the 2 fragments look born to be side by side. You try. You fumble. She smiles. You'll get it. The room fills with the soft sound of cloth brushing cloth, scissors clicking like distant insects, the occasional mutter of color names: cinnabar, orchid smoke, fish belly white. Someone sneezes and blames a cloud of dust from old silk. You laugh for the first time in hours. You're given a special box of remnant strips. These are from funeral robes. Pale colors, simple embroidery, soft textures. The atmosphere shifts as you open it. Even silk carries grief differently. One piece still smells faintly of sandalwood. You sort it carefully. There's a reverence here. Quiet, slow movement. Like touching memory that hasn't finished speaking. Historians still argue whether funerary silks were made specifically for burial or reused from living garments. Some tombs contain robes worn during life, others hold fabric made expressly for death, with hidden messages stitched between the threads, prayers, wishes, names of ancestors. One scholar claimed to find a stitched map of the stars inside a nobleman's burial ramp, guiding him into the afterlife like an embroidered GPS. You glance around the room. Some workers are old. Their hands move slowly but with absolute certainty. You wonder how long they've been here. 10 years? 20? Longer? The patchworker says she's been sorting silk longer than you've been alive. She means it literally. You ask her if she ever tires of it. She thinks. Some days, yes. But then I find a color I haven't seen in years. She holds up a strip of deep ochre. This one was only popular during the Eastern Han. She presses it to her cheek. Still smells like mulberry leaves. Midday passes without you noticing. The light changes. You finish sorting your final basket and present the stacks for approval. The supervisor nods and adds a wooden chip to your name tally. Not for pay, just progress. Someone calls your name again, your Han name, and you follow them into a sunlit hall with cloths pinned along the walls like paintings. It's a display gallery. Here, finished pieces are hung before delivery, partly for inspection, partly to be admired. You recognize one, the brocade river with phoenixes, the one the scribe had traced into the archive. It hangs near the entrance, gleaming under oiled paper windows. A few workers stand nearby, discussing the stitching. You realize this is their version of a gallery opening. Quiet pride, hushed critique, no snacks, but plenty of nodding. Your quirky creation, the misshapen plum blossoms you helped weave, hangs at the far end. You approach it like an old friend. Up close, it's even less perfect than you remember. But it holds something now. Not just thread. Not just labor. There's a corner tag with the name of the team that wove it. Your name is there, too. In small brushstrokes. At the bottom. You don't say anything, you just let yourself look. Historians still debate how collaborative these workshops truly were, whether they operated as family guilds or functioned more like assembly lines. But standing here, surrounded by fabric that carries dozens of hands in every inch, it's hard to imagine one person taking full credit. This is a place where individual ego disappears into shared creation. The sun shifts. A breeze lifts the edge of a hanging robe. The shadows on the wall dance slightly. You stay until the lanterns are lit. Then you turn, quietly, and walk away, leaving your name to hang in thread and die in quiet triumph. You don't have many days left in the workshop. Not that anyone's said it out loud. But you can feel it, the way people start nodding more solemnly when you pass, how the supervisors let you observe certain things they never showed before. You've moved past being the clumsy outsider and become something else. Temporary, yes, but real. Like a seasonal flower in the dye garden. Brief, but remembered. Today, they take you somewhere unexpected, the silk farm. It's a short walk, just beyond the edge of the compound, where the forest gives way to orderly rows of mulberry trees. The leaves rustle softly in the morning breeze, and you notice something you'd never thought about before: the entire world here smells like silk. Not perfume or polish or even dye, but that green, slightly sweet scent of mulberry leaves warmed by the sun. You're greeted by the farm steward, a sun-darkened man with straw sandals and a sense of humor so dry it could tan hides. He waves you toward a low structure filled with wooden trays stacked 6 layers high. You step inside and freeze. It's crawling with life. Tiny white creatures, silkworms, wriggle across heaps of fresh leaves, their soft bodies plump and glossy. You stare in awe. These little grubs, these leaf-chomping gluttons, are the beginning of everything. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Han Dynasty sericulture was already a sophisticated operation by the 1st century BCE. Households, especially in the south, raised silkworms as a cottage industry, often under imperial regulation. The quality of silk varied wildly depending on how carefully the worms were fed, how their cocoons were harvested, and what kind of mulberry leaves were used. The steward lifts a silkworm between two fingers, holds it up to the light. "She's almost ready to spin," he says. You squint. She doesn't look different from the others. The glossier ones are further along, he explains. You learn to see it. Or they tell you, in their way. You watch them chew. They do nothing but eat, grow, and sleep. Yet somehow, in their simplicity, they create one of the most luxurious materials ever known. There's something humbling about it. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some ancient manuals claimed playing music for silkworms could improve the softness of their silk. Others swore that whispering to them made them spin more obediently. A few even blamed poor silk harvests on gossip or loud noises around the worms. So yes, bad vibes were considered an agricultural threat. You're led to another shed, darker and warmer, where trays of cocoons sit in woven baskets. These, you're told, are almost ready for boiling. You pause. Boiling? The steward nods. To unwind the thread, he says. You can't reel the silk unless you soften the gum. You hadn't considered this part. That to get the thread, the worm must be sacrificed. Not all cocoons are treated this way, some are kept intact, so moths can emerge and lay eggs. But for high-quality silk, the thread must remain unbroken. That means cutting short the story of the worm before it completes its transformation. Historians still argue over how silk farmers balanced production with reverence for the worm. Some believe that burning incense during boiling rituals honored the silkworm's sacrifice. Others had no such scruples, efficiency first, ethics later. The truth probably lives somewhere in between. The steward offers you a cocoon. You roll it between your palms, it's surprisingly dense, a tiny world sealed in white. You imagine the worm inside, dreaming of wings it will never wear. Later, you're shown the reeling house. A long bench holds spinning wheels and ceramic bowls of hot water. Workers dip the cocoons, find the loose end of thread, and begin reeling it onto bobbins in one smooth, practiced motion. You try. You snap the thread. Twice. The woman next to you laughs, hands you another cocoon, and says, gently. It's a whisper, not a pull. This time, you manage a few feet of continuous silk. It's so fine it's barely visible. Lighter than breath. Stronger than it looks. You reel, slowly, as the sun creeps higher outside. Around you, women chat quietly while their fingers fly. One is humming a tune that sounds like birdsong. Another shares a joke that makes the others laugh so hard she nearly spills her bobbin. It's work, yes, but like all good work here, it has rhythm. Camaraderie. Tea breaks. As you reel, you think of everything the thread has already endured. Months of feeding, spinning, boiling, soaking, unraveling, and now this. The journey from leaf to thread is longer than any road you've walked. You tuck a broken thread end into your sleeve. Not to steal. Just to remember. Back outside, the steward thanks you with a nod and a slice of pear. You chew slowly, eyes fixed on the worms still chomping through their leaves. Tiny creatures. Monumental output. They don't know what their silk becomes. They don't see the robes or the palaces or the poets writing odes to their cloth. They just spin. And in spinning, they create the threads that hold an empire together. As you walk back toward the compound, the afternoon sun filters through the mulberry branches. You hold that image, of white threads glistening in water, of reeling wheels turning like quiet clocks, of the silkworm's invisible labor becoming something nearly eternal. And you wonder, not for the first time, what might you create, if you simply kept spinning? You wake earlier now. No one needs to call you. Your body knows the rhythm, the creak of the doors, the hiss of the dye pots warming, the scratch of straw brooms against courtyard stone. You rise, wash your face with cool water, and join the others in silence, as if speaking too soon would break the fabric of the day. Today, they tell you, is repair day. Not for tools. Not for buildings. For silk. You're led to a small side chamber that smells faintly of plum oil and old parchment. Inside, several workers sit with mended robes spread before them. These aren't scrap cloths or factory rejects. These are silk garments that have lived, and now need help returning to grace. Your guide, a mender with more silver in her hair than black, places a robe before you. It's beautiful. Or it was. Deep green silk, embroidered with cloud scrolls, but time has faded it unevenly. There's a tear along the sleeve, tiny insect holes dotting the hem. You stare, unsure where to begin. She hands you a magnifying lens and a bundle of thread matched to the original silk. "You're going to invisible mend it," she says. "No patches. No distractions. Every stitch must disappear." You blink. She grins. "Takes patience. Not pressure." Mainstream historical fact: Han Dynasty nobles often commissioned repairs to fine robes rather than discard them. Clothing, especially ceremonial garments, were too precious to waste. Families passed robes across generations. Some dynastic codes even regulated what degree of damage could be mended versus what required a new commission. Your robe? Definitely a mend. You spend an hour just observing. One mender is reweaving threads into a torn shoulder, matching the original pattern exactly, like reconstructing a lost sentence in a poem. Another is repainting faded embroidery with a fine brush and silk-based pigment, so the design glows anew but remains true to its sage. Quirky tidbit: in some cases, invisible mending became so advanced that robes carry deliberate flaws, tiny, purposeful imperfections left as proof of past repairs. Not as damage, but as character. Like smile lines on cloth. You finally take your needle to the sleeve tier. It's slow work. You're not fixing a rib. You're rewriting part of a life. You thread carefully, breathing evenly, and for once, you don't rush. Your guide watches you stitch. "Better," she murmurs. Your hands are listening now. You repair half the tier before noon. It's enough. She takes the robe, holds it to the light, and smiles. Someone will wear this again. And that's when it strikes you: all this work, every thread, every dye, every stitch, is not just for display. It's for return. Restoration. Continuity. Historians still argue how personal these garments were. Did people feel ownership of their robes, or were they seen more as signs of duty and status? Some sources suggest nobles wept when their old robes were taken. Others imply garments were simply reassigned like official titles. But in this room, watching someone re-embroider a hem by candlelight, you suspect the truth was quieter. Clothing, like people, wore stories. You're shown a wall scroll next, a diagram of silk robe structures from the Han court. Shoulder pleats, inner linings, embroidered gussets. You marvel at how structured the design is, how mathematical. Every length measured, every curve considered. Silk was never just draped. It was engineered. One worker brings out a robe so old it nearly crumbles in her hands. She doesn't try to fix it. Instead, she lays it flat on rice paper and traces its outline, preserving the silhouette for the archive. You help hold the corners while she works. The robe is discolored, but still holds the ghost of a pattern, waves and deer, maybe? It's hard to say, but once, someone wore this to a moon viewing party. You can feel it. In the corner of the room, a robe hangs from a frame. It's not for repair. It's for study. One of the earliest surviving Han pieces in the compound, they say. Discovered in a sealed tomb decades ago. You approach it like it might breathe. It's faint gold, with a subtle woven motif of dragonflies. The thread is so thin, the cloth seems to vanish when backlit. A miracle that it survived. A miracle that anyone ever wove something this delicate to begin with. You ask the mender why they haven't restored it. She touches the hem, barely, because some things deserve to fade with dignity. You leave the room in the late afternoon, arms tingling, eyes full of details too fine to explain. In the hallway, you pass by one of the newer apprentices, trying to align a bolt of silk on a loom. It keeps slipping. She's frustrated. You pause, adjust the corner, and whisper, "Try anchoring it with your elbow." She looks up, surprised. Tries it. It works. You keep walking. Later, in the courtyard, you spot a pile of discarded thread ends. Not wasted. Not here. Someone's gathering them into a jar, for patchwork, you guess, or stuffing, or kindling. You add a thread of your own. That night, as the lanterns sway and a breeze stirs the drying cloths, you sit beneath the eaves and reflect. Mending isn't just about saving what's broken. It's a promise. A belief that something flawed is still worth the work. Still worthy of being seen. You don't pack. There's nothing to bring. When you leave the workshop at dawn, it's with empty hands and full sleeves. You walk slowly, memorizing the way the morning mist rises off the dye vats. How the looms creak in their first hesitant pulls, how the scent of wet mulberry leaves still clings to the air. Every sound, every texture is part of you now. No one says goodbye. They don't need to. At the gate, the same old dog lies curled on a flat stone, tail thumping once as you pass. The gatekeeper nods, barely perceptible. That's all. No fanfare. No scroll. Just the click of the latch and the soft sweep of the wooden gate as it closes behind you. You begin walking, unsure where the road will take you. Your feet follow instinct more than map. Fields open around you, bright green under the rising sun. A thin wind tugs at your sleeves like a child asking to be remembered. In your pocket is a folded square of silk, the sin character gift from festival night. You unfold it now. Still smooth. Still bright. You press it to your chest for a moment and then tuck it safely away. Mainstream historical fact: long after the Han Dynasty's fall, silk continued to serve not just as fabric but as memory. Pieces of silk were sewn into burial wrappings, hidden inside amulets, even burned during rituals to carry messages to the spirit world. It wasn't just thread, it was thought, preserved. You pass a trader on the road, his cart piled high with bolts of cloth, spices, ink, and, yes, bundles of silk. He doesn't notice you, but you watch the fabric sway gently as the cart rumbles by. You recognize one pattern: plum blossoms on lilac. Your plum blossoms. You smile. It's not perfect, but it's out there. Somewhere beyond the horizon, someone will run their fingers over that silk and wonder how it came to be. They'll see the mistakes as beauty. The wobble as intention. They'll wear it to a ceremony, a celebration, maybe even a funeral. The fabric won't care. It will carry them just the same. Quirky tidbit: some traveling merchants wrapped their personal letters in silk swatches, claiming it protected against rain and betrayal. Silk has armor. Silk as trust. Maybe that's what you've made, too. You sit under a tree as noon approaches. From your vantage point, the world seems stitched together: rice paddies bordered by irrigation ditches, distant rooftops embroidered against the hills, river paths gleaming like threads pulled tight. You wonder what the others are doing now. Is the dye master burning his fingers again on the indigo pot? Is the young weaver still cursing that stubborn thread? Is the old patchworker sipping tea while holding someone's sorrow in her lap, needle in hand? Historians still argue over how anonymous these ancient artisans were. Most didn't sign their names. Most weren't recorded in official histories. But their works survived. Their patterns persisted. Their skill outlived their names. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the legacy isn't the robe, or the record, or the recognition. Maybe the legacy is the weave itself. You lie back in the grass. Close your eyes. You don't dream of palaces or festivals or phoenixes in gold. You dream of thread. Endless, floating thread. Stretching across sky and sea, mountains and temples, down alleys and across generations. It loops gently, threads itself through time, and always continues. And as the light fades, you drift with it. So now you're lying still, somewhere between memory and dream. The workshop has faded, the mulberry trees now distant silhouettes on the edge of your thoughts. But the feel of silk, cool, smooth, whisper soft, that lingers. You can still hear the faint clack of the loom. The low voices around the dye vats. The warm chuckle of someone threading a needle beside you. These sounds settle into you like the threads of a well-worn robe, subtle, sure, and shaped by quiet labor. Let your breath slow, like the careful winding of silk onto a bobbin. In. And out. Again. No rush. The kind of rhythm only found in places where hands have repeated the same motion for centuries. Imagine the sun dipping low behind the tiled roofs. Lanterns glowing softly along the walkways. The courtyard empty now, save for a swaying robe left to dry overnight. The sky darkens from ochre to ink. There's peace in knowing the work is never finished. That even when you step away, the looms will hum again. New threads will be added. Patterns will shift. But the weave continues. And you? You've left your own thread behind, woven quietly into their story. So relax your fingers, soften your jaw, let your thoughts fade like the last light slipping off polished silk. You've done well. Sleep now.
dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
Quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay không có đỏ. Má xịn kìa, chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh. nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay không có đỏ. Má xịn kìa chứ nói vậy rồi đâu.
Thì chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi. dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay nó có đỏ đâu, không quay nó không có đỏ, má xịn kìa chứ nói này quay đâu.
Thì chớp nhán nhán được rồi. Dàn tới đây luôn á. Lấy máy là quay gửi cho anh Thịnh.
quay
chớp chớp nhán nhán được rồi.